how can we help the C-suite or board members be willing to make the investment to go beyond checking the boxes?
It's a really important question. And look, it's probably one that I'd say you've encountered, Jacob, and I have, and we all have in the tech industry for as long as we've been practicing in it, is this disconnect that can occur between technology people and business people. And there's no shortage of technology people over the years that complain about business people not understanding. And I've got memories or flashbacks to movies of somebody not being able to speak a particular language. So the person who's speaking this language, the other listener doesn't understand things. The remedy is to speak louder and quicker at them, because surely that'll help them understand it, because it doesn't. And the same in the tech world. It's not about trying to force a particular view. It's not the same language we're speaking here. We need to get to a common language. And ultimately that common language is business implications. What does it mean for business? That's a game we're all in. Technology is a means to the end. It's not the end in itself. Yes, there needs to be technology-based discussions with technologists, but it comes to engaging business-level discussions on things like, what are we investing? Why do we invest in that versus something different? Why is this so urgent? They're business-based dialogue. And if we want support for those types of agendas, then we need to talk business language. And those who are successful in technology typically do well in that. So those CIOs who get promoted and then become business leaders are very good at talking business language. And the same in the cyber space. So in cyber, those CISOs that do very well, gain lots of respect, are able to have very meaningful business discussions. And typically those business discussions are around business risk and business scenarios that might play out as an example to create that business risk. And then alongside that business risk will be financial discussions and investment discussions on how to mitigate or avoid those events which lead to those business risks. And how do we quantify what those risks might be? And how much do we have to invest to actually mitigate them? And what does that look like on the portfolio of things that we could do within this organization? There's always more you can do in cyber, right? There's always more you can invest in. There's always another tool set. There's always more capability, more controls. Which ones do you do? Which ones don't you do? These are ultimately business decisions that should be determined on a business basis. And so that's where you can have that dialogue with those business people, is learn to talk in their language, learn to talk in terms of what's the business implications of this risk scenario and what's the cost of the controls to actually mitigate that, or at least mitigate that down to risk tolerance. And how does that stack up in terms of value for money? How does that stack up against the other opportunities we've got to spend money in this organization? And then being able to accept that not all decisions will go your way, right? So you might think, this is something I think is really important, but then you don't control all the dollars. Others have to make those decisions. But as long as they've made those decisions with full mindfulness of what's at stake here and what they're fighting off in terms of risk, because no business can eradicate all risks, right? It's the nature of the game. And so if they're happy to accept that risk, that's fine. You should too. If the risk changes though, if the threat landscape changes, then sure, re-prosecute that argument as appropriate, but have that dialogue at the business level and respect the fact that there is decisions to be made which can be outside of your control, but continue doing your professional job. And so really that's a way to engage, Jacob, as they get into that business discussion. And for those of your listeners who aren't used to having that, the only way to get used to it is actually by starting to do it and then practicing and then thinking that way and getting into more discussions, and you'll get better at it.